Well, hey friends, I am super excited that today I had the incredible opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with the one and only Paul Huyghebaert. In case you don't know Paul, maybe some of you don't, Paul was our minister here at Grace Chapel for 8 years until in June him and his family moved to Florida, and they're now working down there at Southside Church. So in this conversation, I really just wanted to have a chance to get to connect with Paul, myself, and to be able to let y'all listen in. To be able to let y'all listen in to hear how our brother Paul is doing, how the whole Huyghebaert family is doing, and even bigger than that, to get to see how God is working in another part of the world. Because friends, God is working at Southside Church. God is working through Paul Huyghebaert. God is working in our world in such big ways. It's easy for us to just kind of get caught up in our own story, that maybe we miss what God is doing in the whole big world all around us. And today, through this little conversation, I'm hoping you'll get to hear just a little snapshot of one way God is working at Southside, and get to hear from our brother Paul. So check this conversation out, and then I'll close out. I am excited today to get to sit down, have a conversation with Paul Huyghebaert, get to check in, just see how things are going down your way, Paul. So excited
Yeah,
to join me for this.
me too. Me too, for sure. I was excited at the invitation. Excited just to kind of give a snapshot about what's been happening in our lives in the last 6 months. Of course, we've had the chance to connect here and there with folks, but man, yeah, definitely looking forward to this opportunity.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So I was reminded, like we spoke a little bit during our time of fasting here at Grace Chapel,
Yeah.
and just thinking about what you're doing. I know you led your church in a season of
Mhm.
fasting and prayer as well. So I'd love to connect about that and just really just hear
Yeah.
how you're doing. I know some folks maybe haven't heard from you since the last few months. So let's just start with, how are you doing? How's life in Florida? What's been going on in your world in these past 6 months?
Yeah. Well, I mean, life in Florida is good. We'll talk more about stuff as far as the church here at Southside is concerned, as well. But just personally, I'm doing well. Yeah, I think everybody was aware a big part of what precipitated us having open eyes to other things was the struggle that I had in winter times with the seasonal affective stuff.
Mhm.
And, I'm just excited to share that, I really haven't had any of that. So the relocation in many ways has been the fix at this point in time for this issue. Of course, it really helps when most days down here in the wintertime are sunny and about 70, 72 degrees. And in fact, we were last Saturday. We went and sat on the beach, and the water was warm enough still that the kids uh, jumped in and did some boogie boarding and some skim boarding and all that stuff. And so that really is a big help in that regard. And so so that way, good. I mentioned them kind of as we were talking before we began this kind of official conversation. I've been wrestling for a month now with a back injury, and it's the kind of back injury I've never had before. It affected my ability to not pray. I think I prayed more than maybe I ever have. But it did affect my ability to fast because of the medication that I was taking. Some of it required me to take it with food and kind of at these 8-hour intervals. And so, unfortunately, during the time of fasting, I probably ate more as opposed to eating less. But I definitely was able to myself get involved in a lot of the praying. But the back injury has really been a big feature in my life, partially because it was semi-traumatic in some sense, even though I can't point to exactly what it was that caused it. But what I can say is that you know um, on a Sunday night about 1 in the morning, I had to go wake Lori up and say, "Hey, you've either got to call an ambulance or drive me to the hospital because I can't do this anymore." So so that was been pretty intense. But as far as the family's concerned, the kids are doing well. They're settling into school. We've really been blessed with a really good school situation for the kids. They're developing friend groups that we're excited about, and that's good for them. They needed that kind of peer engagement. As I've shared, here we don't. Our youth group is very small but growing. In fact, one thing that I kind of joked, when we were leaving Grace Chapel, I said, our kids will be going to a church that's not even really as large as the youth group, and so. So there's going to be a lot of change, as we're doing what's we've termed like a church revitalization or almost a restart effort. Um, so that's been a real change and transition for them. But because they're at a Christian school, they've had a real good Christian, peer group. That's been really good. And so that's kind of all across the board. And that's not to say that that Lori doesn't, that I don't. I mean, we absolutely do have moments where um, we miss you guys incredibly, and that we feel that void. And the difference of the relationships across distance. Um, it's not that those relationships are gone; they're just very different when they're across distance. And so we've enjoyed having the chance to see several people who've made their way down here, or some that been able to meet in Orlando. All that's been great, but man, we miss the folks at Grace Chapel terribly, and don't think that's going to go away. But overall, we're doing well, for 6 months into a major move.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I'm sure I would echo the sentiment of anyone watching this too and say we feel the same. Definitely miss y'all and miss having you here, and are also excited about what God is doing your way, what God is still doing here. And man, I'm excited to hear how you're doing, that the doing better in mental health, and I
Yeah,
hope it continues to get better with your back, that
yeah, thanks.
that improves.
Yeah, and it's just gonna take some
Yeah,
time, and
for sure, for sure.
I have had to kind of do a level setting on my expectations, past back injuries, because I've had some back injuries in the past. I pretty much count that within a few days I'll be doing better. This one's more like, hey, it's gonna take weeks for this one to get better. And now a month in, I'm at a much better place than I was, but still just struggling. And so, we'll see. I mean, I've got some appointments coming up that will really give a clear picture on what needs to happen.
Sure.
But again, there've been so much time spent in prayer. Pain will do that to you. I mean, when you're in pain, you pray. And it has really been good for me, in that it has um, guided me, as I know many have before, when they faced big struggles, whether it's a struggle of pain or a health issue or whatever else. May guide you to a place, if your relationship with God is healthy, you draw deeper into that relationship, as opposed to the opposite, the other way. And so it's definitely done that for me, and I'm grateful from that perspective.
Hmm. That's encouraging to hear. Yeah. So so tell us, Paul, like, how are things going in the church world?
Yeah. Okay.
Southside, things going in
Yeah.
ministry.
Yeah.
What's exciting you down there?
Yeah, I mean, what's most exciting to me is I mean, we are watching people who didn't know Jesus come to know Jesus, and we're actually, I mean, 6 months in, we're seeing that happen. We're already starting to see that happen through um, through some of the folks who've been here for a number of years really come alive to the gospel. Is a really powerful thing. It really has transformed my life, and I really do need to share this with others. And so, we as we had done at Grace Chapel too, and I mean, very similar thinking. We're very much trying to be a church of disciples who make disciples.
Hmm.
And so when I was here in the first few months, we're trying to define how are we going to express that. So I'm kind of leading that process with a few leaders here who are trying to catch the vision for that. And so we came up with this way of expressing who we're going to be, like what it means to be part of this church community of disciples who make disciples. And so we are people that know, live, and share. God's good truth everywhere we go, basically. So know, live, share, and is what we say um, pretty consistently. It's become a rallying cry. I was at a meeting. I guess today's Tuesday, so I was at a meeting yesterday evening, and one of the elders was just talking about how he was sharing with somebody just this importance, this value of this idea of know, live, and share. and how knowing comes easy, living comes a little bit harder, sharing's even a little bit harder. But these are all things that God calls us into if we're really going to be disciples. And so I'm listening to that being talked about, and I'm seeing the vision being caught by others. And so that to me is exciting. I mean, we had a baptism on Sunday. Um, who baptism, this person was connected with someone else at the church. And so, so there was some witnessing and some sharing there that happened, and then a rallying around by other folks and a discipling through kind of a process of several folks engaging, and then out of that, this conviction. And I think, we will likely have a couple more baptisms this month that come out of very similar kind of ground, you know. And so I'm definitely seeing here where we are. The ground is definitely fertile. We're in what has become over the last decade the fifth largest city in Florida.
Oh, wow.
And so Port St. Lucie now has 260,000 people.
Okay.
And it is also, there are some churches here, and there are some large churches here. There's no doubt about that. But when you compare the number of churches to the population, this is a largely unchurched area. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. One thing that I'll say, a lot of people here too, if you think about kind of the Southeast and the Bible Belt, and Atlanta very much a part of that, I'd say Atlanta is kind of, we're coming as too. The people that aren't part of a church are often de-churched. So they had a church experience themselves,
Yes.
and they've withdrawn from that. Here, we're a generation past that. So their parents were the unchurched ones.
Okay.
So we're now dealing with truly unchurched people, or their parents were the de-churched ones. We're dealing with unchurched people. So that's kind of unique in that there is an interesting openness here. And so, I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about, watching things change in tangible ways here. Seeing life and vibrancy come back to a community where people were kind of in a holding pattern for a time, at best. And so, in 6 months, we've seen attendance double, and sometimes more than double, and so that's just one metric, the Sunday morning attendance. But of course, I'm most excited about watching the beginning of disciples making disciples as it relates to ministry.
Man, I know, Paul, from how you brought that culture here at Grace Chapel and did so much really to skyrocket that of this really, I want to say, when you use the word dogmatic focus on discipleship. I use that in the best way possible. Of like, I have loved throughout just so many of our staff meetings together, how you have really cast that vision to us that I believe we are continuing to faithfully pursue, and super excited to hear how we're able to do that same thing in another area, in another environment. And it's really cool to hear how God's able to use you down there.
I appreciate that. I'll just say real quick too, you mentioned the work ongoing at Grace Chapel. I continue to hear really, really exciting, encouraging things about what's happening there. And so that has been a real joy to me to know that you guys are continuing to move the ball forward as far as it relates to, traction on the mission and living that out faithfully. And, I think that in some sense, as we see more and more churches moving this direction, although it's slow, you get these pockets where you get churches that are really embracing the mission of Jesus, and you're seeing everyday ordinary disciples make disciples of Jesus. And I'm extremely excited to see what happens, in the next few years, and then a decade down the road, as maybe we move beyond what still looks like addition to something that looks a lot more like the first fruits of multiplication, and we're seeing that happen in some places too already. And so that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's, I can remember being in a staff meeting and basically saying, I remember when I hit that moment where I couldn't go back to doing church the way church had been.
Yeah.
And several of the rest of you guys saying the same thing, and Rob even sharing his moment of like the point of no return, where you start to do ministry, especially related to living mission, a certain way, and you just realize I'm not going back to the other, and I want to lead a group of people to go further into this with me. And so yeah, I'm excited to get to do that here, and super excited to hear how you guys just keep leaning heavy into that as well. It's good stuff.
For sure. So, I mean, and you've already shared a couple of things, but just tell us what are like a few stories that maybe you'd share of just how you're seeing God on the move, of how you've been seeing Him work in Southside.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I can definitely do that. I'll go back to um, so um, we have incorporated, I think if I remember correctly, a prayer of sending and blessing. Great. We had that great chapel as well.
yep.
So we've incorporated a prayer of sending and blessing, and I will randomly get, I've been leading that most of the time, much of the time, but I will get one of the elders or another one of the guys who's really starting to catch the fire say, "Hey, I really want to lead the prayer of sending and blessing next week. Can I do that?" And so, we'll have that, and I'll say, absolutely. Anytime one of you guys wants to lead that, normally I'm leading it and tying it into the message right at the close and saying, here's how we're being sent this week with this, but anytime I get one of those guys who says, can I own that this week? I get pretty juiced up about that. We had that last week, and it was fantastic. You can see how in that the mission is becoming personal, and the call to go live what we just talked about, so that it goes way beyond the know, it goes to the live, and then it moves into the share. That piece is really exciting. I also say, the time of fasting, the time of prayer and fasting, it was pretty cool. Several stories that came out of that, including one of a lady who'd really never spent any time fasting like that at all, and and she's a bit older, but decided I want to do this. I think this is a biblical thing. I want to do this, and with tears in her eyes, told me kind of at the conclusion of it just how meaningful that time had been to her, and how she, having been a Christian her whole life, had never experienced a period like this. We did 2 weeks, and our time of prayer and fasting, we called it praying for purpose, but I kind of played off that a little bit, and say we're praying on purpose for purpose. So here's this reason we're praying, that the purposes of God, that we would live those out. And so we moved through 14-day period with focusing on different things in that, and just a lot of really good that would come out of that. I'd send out the emails the same way, we'd do at Grace Chapel. You'd stage emails so the devotionals would go out daily and push them out through our app. And just about every day, I would get a response back from somebody or somebody's, just to say, here's how this hit me today. And so that was really encouraging. I would say too, we're going to end up being very much multi-generational and multicultural church, which is pretty neat. We very much started in one place, and are watching a new thing happen, which to me is an exciting thing too, as we're seeing more young folks come in, but I'm watching a group of older folks, predominantly retirees, reach out and kind of step out of themselves to really connect with these younger folks. And even heard had this younger family that I was talking to just the other day say, actually one of the things that I like most about church right now is coming and engaging with all these older folks who have this wealth of wisdom. I didn't know I would be drawn to that, but I am right now. And so, so God to do, it's been cool to watch God to do sometimes these semi unlikely things, things that would push back against maybe what, like, the conventional wisdom. But that's what God does. I mean, he's the one who does more than we can ask or imagine. And so, it's, having said that, I mean, this has been and is going to continue to be a tough work, in the sense that right now I'm the only staff member, but we've got some great some people really pouring a lot of time in at the volunteer level. And so it's working. But it's just a very different thing going from, the Grace Chapel
Yeah.
being one of quite a few and doing a very specialized role, and now doing a more diversified role. But
Yeah.
that's been it's been fun, and through that I get to share lots of different kinds of stories instead of just being focused on maybe one or two things. But yeah, I mean, we've had some really neat stories for sure, in the last several months, and I look forward to seeing more of those come, especially as we are seeing um, people come to know Jesus that didn't really have a relationship with him before.
Man,
It's exciting.
it's exciting to both just hear relationally because we care about you and care about what you're doing, but then just to see and looking at the broader mission that sometimes we can get very, I think, caught up in our own world, our own sphere, but to see how God is working outside of these walls and so many countless churches throughout the nation. But just to hear that as one example in yours is really, really encouraging.
No, I
And
appreciate that.
I think I speak for all of us when I say we want to be able to continue to partner with you in prayer and to
Mhm.
like I just want to be able to celebrate the mission, celebrate what
Mhm.
you're doing. So is there any way, Paul, as we kind of come to a close here, that we can be praying for you, that we can be partnering with y'all in prayer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we talked so much about Colossians 4, 3-6, and in the last several years at Grace Chapel, if you all would commit to praying Colossians 4 over us, because we truly are looking for open doors. Many of us are looking for open doors, and we're trusting that God will be the one that opens those doors. Um, what's neat, this is in some ways, this is a little bit of an older community. What I mean by that is not the age of the folks, but there's not there's an established footprint here. A lot of folks have an established footprint here. They've been here a long time. They know a lot of folks.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of established relationships. And we're seeing through those already established relationships, we have a large footprint of influence.
Mhm.
And we're hoping that with that large footprint of influence, even though we're a small group, roughly about 100 folks right now, um, we're hoping that God will open doors, and that it almost be like this tidal wave, that can't be contained um, as that influence and impact expands for the sake of the kingdom. And so, really asking that God would be the one that opens doors, that He would help us make the most of every opportunity, that we might communicate the message clearly, um, that whatever opportunities He puts in front of us, we make the most of. And you know, I see that happening. Um, but man, to know that more people are praying for that would be super encouraging.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that'd be it. And if you want to pray for my back too, I'm down with that.
Yes, we'll
Yeah,
add that in as well.
yeah, love it.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Well, there you have it, folks. That was my conversation with the one and only Paul Huyghebaert. I hope that conversation was as encouraging and edifying for you as I know it was for me. It is so special to get to hear from our brother Paul, who we deeply love, deeply care about, and also just to get to hear how God is on the move and how God is working. And I gotta tell you, as soon as that Zoom call ended, Paul and I were able to hang out on the phone for a few more minutes, and I just got to hear story after story of how God is working through all the members of his family in just such a special way, and it is so encouraging to hear. So I do just want to reiterate Paul's request for prayer, that we would just pray over him, pray those words of Colossians 4, 2-4. I'm going to just read that to you again in case you forgot it. Colossians 4, starting in verse 2. It says to devote yourselves in prayer with an alert mind and thankful heart. Pray for us too, that God will give us opportunities to speak about his mysterious plan concerning Christ. That is why I'm here in chains. Pray that I will proclaim the message as clearly as I should. Y'all, let's let that be our prayer for the Huyghebaert family. I am excited to continue to hear how God keeps working in a mighty way down there, and how God keeps working in a mighty way right here at Grace Chapel. We love y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you later.